Let's do a little reset of our wide receiver rankings right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Welcome. That was almost mute, Dave. I almost muted myself there.
You're killing the express whisper thing.
Yeah, careless whisper on my part.
You're being very careless about it, yes.
So
you should have known better than to cheat a friend.
Yeah, my bad. So anyway,
what if that?
The hell, I have no idea what we're talking about. All right, have a great day, everybody. My brain is fried. Did free agency change your wide receiver rankings a lot?
Not at the top. It did in terms of, like Davante Adams changed teams. JSN, it wasn't really free agency, but saw two teammates leave, and I don't know if they've really been replaced appropriately or with, similar talent, one-for-one talent. But for the most part at the top, the guys at wide receiver have been the same since I've started ranking players. And that does include Puka Nacua, who for now is at number 3. I think there's a clear top 2. It's the LSU twins. It's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Nothing to really think about with those two guys. And then there's this group of 6, and these are all receivers that I think fantasy managers love. They'd covet 2 of them on a fantasy team. They'd obviously be happy with one of them. But it's Nacua, Nabers. This is how I have it ranked. Nacua, Nabers, St. Brown, CeeDee, Nico Collins, and Brian Thomas Jr. And that's a great group. And those are all guys that can potentially touch 20 PPR points per game. That's why they're there. And it makes for a real strong start for the wide receiver position when we go drafting in August.
I don't think that we should just accept Chase and Jefferson at the top as not even worth debate. And Jefferson was wide receiver 6 per game. That's if you include Rashee Rice and Chris Godwin. I think you should definitely include Godwin. He averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game. He did that with, I believe, a career high 10 touchdowns. There's obviously some quarterback uncertainty there. Chase did something that he's just never done before. I mean, he hit 17 touchdowns. And look at his year, right? 17 games, 100 yards per game. That's not, obviously it's great. It's not as good as what Jefferson's done. It's not as good as what Tyreek Hill has done, in his best stretches. It's not as good as what Cooper Kupp did that one year. So I would have it Chase Jefferson too. I just don't know that it's so set in stone. I really think Puka Nacua has a great argument to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. I mean, he was better than Jefferson last year, and I wish he could stay healthy, but man, is he good.
The argument would have been easier to make if they hadn't have signed Davante Adams to replace Cooper Kupp. That's an improvement for the Rams offense. And Davante Adams will absolutely take away high-value targets from Puka Nacua in a similar way that Cooper Kupp did before the end of last season. And I think Davante Adams, he's older. There's no question. And we're not talking about Davante as a top 12 type of fantasy receiver. I still think he could be a good number 2 receiver. I think he landed in one of the absolute best places he could have landed in. And it's going to impact Puka depending on how this is how I kind of view Puka. Top 5 wide receiver, yes. Could he slide down from 3 based on what the Giants do at quarterback, because Malik Nabers has ridiculous upside and huge target volume? Could somebody like CeeDee Lamb jump up ahead of Puka Nacua because of the same exact thing, target volume? That'll depend on a lot of factors in Dallas. But I do see Puka not having the same type of upside that Chase and Jefferson have. And as for the quarterback situation for the Vikings, we've seen it now 2 years, last year's with Kevin O'Connell. He's schemed things up so well with quarterbacks that we can't call elite. Kirk Cousins is good. He was good 2 years ago. But even he got hurt at one point, and Justin Jefferson didn't quite miss a beat. It was a little bit lower once Kirk Cousins got hurt, but it wasn't by a lot.
To rank him second, he's coming off his worst season since his rookie year, basically.
Yeah, he had almost the exact same average as his rookie year. He had 9.1 targets per game. He also had 8 games with 20-plus PPR points.
Yeah,
and I think J.J. McCarthy, if McCarthy ends up being the starter for Minnesota, I think he can keep Jefferson close to that 20-point number on a per game basis.
Okay, let's take a break and talk about the free agency angle of this right after this on FFT Express. Okay, so JSN, Chris Godwin re-signed. You got DK Metcalf getting traded, Davante Adams to the Rams. Anything? What were the major takeaways from free agency?
So JSN is my favorite one for now. It's either him or Godwin. It's based on target volume. But I think that JSN is clearly the best receiving talent that Seattle has in their offense right now. It's not that I think that Sam Darnold's going to be great, and maybe he's not going to be capable of supporting two wide receivers like he did in Minnesota last year. It is different play callers, obviously, and it's a worse offensive line, and that's going to be an issue for Darnold. But I think JSN has just proven to be just a great target-earning wide receiver who, even if he ends up, we had this conversation last week on the main show, will he play outside more? Well, I went back and I watched a lot of his outside snaps, and he's running slot receiver snaps where he's breaking in from out wide. And if that's what he ends up doing, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off for him based on, where he lines up. And that's a death sentence for his fantasy production. So I think the numbers will be good with him. Godwin, obviously, I'm assuming that he'll be okay for the start of training camp. He'll go through training camp without any issues. Remember, he dislocated his ankle. Was it his ankle?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's obviously something that we have to keep tabs on. But the way that he played last year, and he was averaging about 9 targets per game, really, really hard to ignore that. Even with Baker Mayfield and company, Mike Evans is there too. A new play caller's there. It's going to be the 3rd year in a row where they have a different play caller. I don't expect there to be much of a change. And then we already talked about Davante Adams. He's right behind those two guys for me. DK Metcalf would be a little bit further down. Concern about the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh is certainly going to be a factor. But at least with Davante Adams, older guy, don't think we can count on him to be in that 17, 18 PPR point per game range. But he might be able to get in that 15, 16 range. That's a really good number 2 wide receiver that you'll get on a discount.
Chris Godwin was on pace for 121 catches, 1,400 yards, and 12 touchdowns.
Yummy.
He was unbelievable. And boy, I struggle because you took him 30. What did you take? 37th overall, I think, in our last draft.
Loved it.
Yeah, it's too rich for me just because of the injury. He just is reminding me of Tank Dell and Tony Pollard, and those guys needed a long time to get back to normal.
So, well, listen, if he's hobbling his way through training camp, he's not going to go that high.
He won't be.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, it's going to, the report's going to be great. He looks great. And then when the games start, he just may not be himself. We didn't think Tank Dell, there was never any, he's hobbling, he's not himself. But I don't think he was himself. He wasn't making these big explosive plays. So that's just
luckily that's not an issue for Godwin. Like, he can make explosive plays, but not in the same way that we would have expected Tank Dell to do it. And Tank Dell was clearly slower once we got eyes on him.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dave Richard, thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll talk to you Wednesday on the name of the show that I'm not going to say. See ya.